I am Dr. Darlene Antizana. I am interviewing Mr. Albert Michael Dickson for the office of Congresswoman Donna Edwards. We are recording at Prince George's Community College on October the 12th, 2013. Good morning.
Good morning.
Where and when were you born?
Washington, D.C., 16th of June, 1928.
Oh, wow. Who were your parents?
Mary Teresa and Alexander Dickson Sr.
What were their occupations?
Their occupation?
Yes, sir.
Well, at that particular time, my father was a Pullman porter.
Oh.
And my mother was a stay-at-home mother.
Oh.
There was 4 of us. Older brother, and then I was the third of 3 boys. And then my baby sister was born, 2 years apart. So the unfortunate part, when she came, my mother had 2 babies on her hand, me and the baby that had just been born, because we were both born in June, me in 28 and her in 30.
Oh.
So I was still crawling around on the floor.
What were their names?
The oldest, Alexander Dickson Jr., Thaddeus, then me, Albert, and my sister, Angela.
Did any of them serve in the military?
Oh, well, my oldest brother was drafted. The war broke out December the 7th of 41. Alec left on the 18th of February, 1942. Thad left 2 years later, going in the Navy, both of those. My oldest brother went to Europe shortly after D-Day, and he was there until the war was over. Thad was still in the service. He served in the Pacific on a ship. Then around February 46, my father took deathly ill, and the Red Cross made provisions for him to be shipped from San Francisco back to Washington, signed to the Navy Yard, and my father passed right after, and they discharged him from the Navy. Okay. But in the meantime, I stayed in high school. My sister was in high school at that time.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Oh, I was very fortunate. I'd been working on back there then, you had to do everything to make a few dollars because the parents didn't have them. Everything came hard. But when the war came on, I served newspapers in my community for about 3 or 4 years. Then during the war, so many of the men was going into service, they dropped the age limit to work in the government from 18 to 16.
Oh.
And I was able to get on part-time in the post office, working 6 to 10. Of course, the rules were laid down. You're not going to quit school. You're going to stay in school. And sure enough, that's where I stayed. But I worked 4 hours a day and made my little government check, brought it home, and the first thing you do, you got to pay mama. You pay mama for that, for feeding you and clothing you and keeping you clean. But then I went on, I graduated, and I was lucky enough to stay on in the post office. And that's where I stayed till I retired in 1984.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, in what branch of the service did you serve?
Army.
Okay.
Yeah, I was inducted at, I didn't want to go. I'm going to tell you, I did not want to go. But I got my letter. What's the unfortunate thing about it? The Korean War broke out on the 25th of June, 1950. My wife and I got engaged on the 29th of June. And 3 weeks later, I got my uncle send me my letter. And I went into service. I was inducted 3rd of January 1951 here in Washington, D.C.
So you were drafted.
I was drafted. No enlisted, no.
Okay. Did you have a choice of which branch of service that you could go into when you were drafted?
Now, at that particular time, no, because the Korean War was at its highest, and they were putting just about everybody in the Army. It wasn't no choice. I had preferred to go if I had a chance. I would have gone in the Air Force. But they put me in the Army, and that's where I went, in the Army.
Where did you go for your training camp?
Fort Hood, Texas. Went to Fort Meade in the induction center. Then we all got together and they took us down to Fort Hood, Texas. That's where I did my basic training. From there, after boot camp, I was, different ones were going to school, and this was the Armor Division, 2nd Armor Division. And I was sent to Fort Knox, Kentucky for tank commander school. And I finished my course there, came home on my furlough because I knew I was going overseas under Eisenhower at that time. I stayed home. I left here on the 30th of May, 1951, and never returned home again until the 26th of December of 1952.
Oh, so it was a year.
Yeah, quite some time.
What memories do you have of your early training?
Well, let me put it to you like this. Training was nice, but I want to say this. Remember, I was inducted into a segregated army.
Yes, sir.
At the time, the army was segregated. All the training was taken, all black soldiers together with white officers. I had no problem because the one thing my brothers had told me, don't get into any trouble. That's what they do. What you're told to do your time, and come on back home. And that stuck with me, especially my oldest brother. He was like a father to us. I had no problem. I did well down in Fort Hood. I did well in Fort Knox under commander. Went overseas. We were broken down. Learned the tanks that we were assigned to, and just did what I was told to do, because I knew I was there. No, it wasn't coming home. And I began to make rank, and that's another thing that I thank my oldest brother for. Make as much rank as you can, because the higher you go up, the better the position is. And that's what I did.
Do you recall any of your instructors from your training camp?
Did I recall any of them?
Do you remember any of them?
Oh, yes. The one I think that most of those just went and went. But the one that impressed me the most was once they integrated the service, and I was sent to this other unit. I left the 29th Heavy Tank Battalion and went to the 57th Medium Tank. And they were offering schools and everything else. Well, they had a program going, TIE, Troop Information and Education. And by that, every Saturday morning, they would get the troops together and they pass out, give, information someone to instruct it. So they called me in and said, Sergeant Dickson, would you like to go and become an instructor? Well, I said, yeah. A 3-week course? I said, of course. 3 weeks? Don't have to do no soldier. Yes, indeed. So they said, oh, it was a good little distance. I was in Mannheim. And once I got there, and the instructor, I'll never forget, it was a colonel. And he began to show us the technique of how to present yourself in front of people. And you remember now, I had to sell to my comrades. So he showed us the different techniques of how to do it, how to put it over. And I really enjoyed that. I remember him because it never made me shy from that training. I never became shy of standing in front of a crowd or getting up, speaking, talking. I could stand out there and drill the troops. So why not? I stood in front, and I began and even the guys, when I went back to the company and everything else, they always looked forward when they Saturday mornings come around, because he told us always try to interlock the soldiers out there, see, because they don't want to be there no way. So if you can bring them in, then you get a little reaction. And sure enough, I found out they began to say, well, Dickson, what is about this? And see, that means I was getting some reaction. But that's one thing I did. So that's that.
How did you adapt to military life? The food, the social life, barracks, the regiment?
Well, the food is something you just have to accept. You ain't gonna do nothing about that. But like once you get to know the guys, unfortunate for us, quite a number of the fellows that went in with me, were drafted with me, we were all in the same graduating class from high schools. See, in Washington at that time, they only had 3 colored high schools. And we all knew one another because it was a close-knit thing. And when we all went in, we knew somebody, we stayed close to one another because we were all in this together. And we became very friendly, and that made it that much easier because you knew fellas. And adopted, well, you see, Washington at that time, the high schools had a program called the ROTC. I see they have started that now. And, that used to be the thing. That was the thing in Washington. And every boy that went into it always hoped and prayed when he became a senior, he become an officer. Right. Well, I was fortunate. I became a company commander. That gave me more chance to lead, follow instructions, be told what to do, and know how to accept orders that's passed down. So going into the military and having the PFC tell you what to do, it didn't worry me because I knew that was change the command. I did what I was told to do. And I adapt to it very well. Of course, just like I say, the food, you can forget that. you just accept that. Because But for the rest of it, the regiment following lights out, and that was it. Yeah.
What did you do on your off time?
Well, normally we would sit around and play bid whist. The
Okay.
fellows would play bid whist and everything else, and then when payday come, payday they always going to start gambling, but I wasn't into that, and we have fun playing. Once you go to the PX and get your little goodies and everything, we'd just sit and play play bid whist, and that was, that passed the time away. But here's what I did to pass my time away. Going over on the ship, we left Fort Hood, Texas, went to Galveston, Texas. That's where we boarded, the port at Galveston, Texas, and sailed there going to Germany. I saw a book, a paperback book, Duel in the Sun. A guy was reading. And I said, how is that? He said, oh man, it's good. I said, can I read it when you finish it? And I read that book going over. And you'd be surprised the time that went by. I said, this is how I'm going to do my time. And I made sure every payday I would go down and buy me a couple of paperbacks. Wasn't but 25 cents. Now they're $10. I could get them 25 cents. I buy me 2 or 3 books, keep them in my footlocker. And after everything is over and everything, I just stay there and read. And to this day, I do nothing but read.
So do I.
And that's right. I just picked it up.
So you served in Korea?
In
Korea?
No. I didn't make it to the Korea. See,
Ah.
I didn't make it to Korea. I was in the conflict. See, I'm considered a Korean War vet because I was drafted in that time. Fortunate enough, by us going to Fort Hood, at that time they were building Europe back up. And Eisenhower, because he was still the supreme commander, they needed a strong force. And they were trying to reinforce Europe because, that was leading into the Cold War. Now, you may not know about the Cold War with the Russians and all. And they wanted to build Europe up for Americans to have a strong strength there in case something broke loose in Europe.
So where did you serve abroad?
I served in Germany, just like I said, from the July of 51 until December of 52. Yeah, that's where I served.
And what are your memories of that time?
Oh, my memories? Well, let's say after you got settled in and got a chance to say when we first got there, I went to a place called Baumholer, Germany. It was way up in the mountains, and train would bring in there. But that's where we did most of our training, in that battalion. And then once they integrated, I left there and went down to Mannheim, Germany. And that's where I did most of it. I finished up serving my time in Mannheim.
How was your experience with that integration of the Army?
Oh, you don't want to know about that.
Yes, sir, I do.
All right. The whole battalion was of Southern soldiers. It wasn't accepted very well.
Oh, wow.
That after President Truman integrated the service. show you a good example. In the army, the unit I left at the 29th Tank Battalion, I was a platoon sergeant. That's what I was. I was supposed to go down. They made it change over. At least one master sergeant would become a first sergeant in one of the other units. I would become a tank commander in this unit. Well, but by the time we left Bomberholder, got down to Mannheim, we didn't have a master sergeant to become the first sergeant. They promoted a tech sergeant to master, made him the first sergeant, and the first sergeant that went down, he became a platoon sergeant, and he was a master sergeant. Well, I was no more than a staff sergeant. Well, I went in. I knew where I was. I knew the hardships that could be placed upon you if you didn't do right. But again, I'm looking at it like this. I'm a short timer. And I'm going to do everything I can to pass this time away so I can get out without any trouble. Well, there's one incident. I'm going to share this with you. To this day, I think about it more than ever. But I'm glad it worked out the way it did. As I said, I went to quite a number of the schools that they offered. We had the old M26 tanks they were using in Korea. We had those in Europe. Well, they became obsolete. They made new tanks. I went to school for that. Learned how to drive it, how to shoot the gun, how to command it. And I came back. I was going to instruct some of the, troops. But there's one thing about the Army. They were giving those old tanks away, and they had to be cleaned up. And I mean clean. On the inside of a tank is white, and they wanted it white. And we always tried to take the shortcut using gasoline to wipe down the grease and everything, which you're not supposed to do. Then you had to clean the gun, that 90 millimeter gun. And I had this small detail, like 4 or 5 guys. One of them on privates, PFCs. And we had to clean. I told my little detail, I said, look, let's go up there, clean that breech block. I'm gonna swing by the mess hall, see if I can get us some sandwiches. And I'll meet y'all in the motor pool, and we'll good thing. Of the 5, 4 of them said, okay, Sergeant Dickson. He jumped up there. The other fella, he didn't move. I said, you get up there. And to this day, here's what he said to my face. Where I come from, we don't do nothing a nigger tell us what to do. He said that to my face. They expect for me to have hit him, but my parents didn't raise no fool. I took it, and I told him, you're not doing what this tell you what to do, and you're doing what this tell you. He just repeated it again. And in the meantime, this was around all of the other sergeants, all white, No one stepped forward to be on my side. To go to him and say, do you know what you have done? Do you know you were telling a sergeant, you know you called them out? Nobody. You could hear a pin roll on that asphalt. And I had to stand there. Now, if I'd have hit him, they would have charged me with hitting an enlisted man. I'd end up in the stockade. So after he refused, after I gave him the second direct order, I let it go. I went on down to the company commander's office, told the first sergeant. First sergeant took me in, told the company commander. They sent for him. They brought him down there. And he said, I understand that Sergeant Dickson gave you an order and you refused. He repeated it again, the same words, to the company commander.
Incredible.
But that didn't last long, because the first sergeant had already taken out the articles of war. They charged him disrespect to a non-commissioned officer. He was sentenced to 6 months hard labor at Frankfurt Prison, forfeit with all pay and allowances. It just proved one thing. The pen at that time was mightier than the sword.
Yes, it was.
But to this day, I can see that man standing in front of me, calling me out my name. That was the hardest thing that I encountered.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that was hard. And I often think about it, but as I said, oh well, it went on. But my time in the service, I didn't want to go in the service. I really didn't. But I just wish they had the service today for all young men, because those 2 years didn't do me no. They made me a better man. Because we were going to be married in April of '51. And although we wanted to get married, I know I probably wasn't ready to marry. But those 2 years of living with men, sacrificing, sharing, being dirt and everything else, it made a better man of me. And now I learned a lot. Then I went on in the reserve and did 8 years. Yep. And would have stayed. But the job I had at that time paid more than the rest, and I had to stay on the job. But I'm sorry I didn't stay in the reserve, so I have a very dear friend. Him and I became the best of friends. He's my friend today. He stayed and did 26 years. And I wanted to stay, but my job paid more money than the reserve did. But I enjoyed it. So, yeah.
How did you stay in touch with your family and your friends while you were serving overseas?
Oh, you mean in the service?
Yes, sir.
Letter write. Oh, my mother, I got a letter from my mother every Monday. Every Monday. She wrote me regular. And every Monday, mail call, my mother sent me a letter. Always. Then my sister. Every once in a while I'd hear from one of my brothers, but I didn't expect them to write. But my mother, my fiance, and my sister, and I always wrote home. And by my mother sending that letter, I didn't get it one Monday. Didn't get nothing that whole week. And I said, something's wrong. Sure enough, my mother was sick. And I didn't know it. And I got a letter from her, and it wasn't a long one, just a little, just want to let you know how you doing and everything. But I could see a little pen scratch. And then about the next week, she waited, wrote again. And then my oldest brother wrote and told me, we were thinking that we may have to get the Red Cross to bring you home because Mama was sick. But it passed over. They didn't have to do it. But they never let me know till I came home that my mother was sick.
So when you came home, what was that like?
Oh my God. Oh, the experience I had, okay, I waited. I did my time. I knew my time was coming. November. I'm looking into December. I'm due out on the 2nd of January, 53. They got to be rotating me out of here. So they finally decided reason why I was being held back because I had all this training and they didn't have qualified guys to pass on until we could get the others trained and everything. They're sacrificing me to train these other guys. But it finally came around that they realized they had to turn me loose sooner or later. So they rotated me off, sent me down to Bremerhaven, catch the boat to come home. Now, this is wintertime, and don't nobody want to come across the Atlantic in the wintertime. But anyway, I don't care. I was going to get on that boat. We got down to the boat that put up to come home, and 360 of us got left because they brought the dependents home, and we were left.
Oh.
And the next boat wasn't going to leave out until sometime in February. Now, this is December the 14th, 1952, and the next boat wasn't going to be till in February 53. Now, can you imagine what that would be like? But Christmas Day, 1952, the colonel at the depot called of all of us together. He said, I got good news for 10 of you. Some VIPs visiting have decided to stay over for Christmas. That means their airplane going back, 10 vacant seats. He said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the 10 closest men to Washington, D.C. And I jumped up. I know I'm number one. And he looked down at this little piece of paper. You must be Sergeant Dickson. That's me. Yeah, you're number one. Can you imagine? I have the Christmas Day. That was my Christmas present.
Yes.
That was a Christmas present. And they got us together. Then when they got down and saw that airplane, I said, I don't want to get on that airplane. I ain't going to fly over the Atlantic Ocean. No. He said, soldier, you don't tell us what to do. You go on. And it was quite an experience. Remember now, it weren't jets.
Yes, sir.
They were propellers. And we took off, and I was scared to death. We landed up there in Iceland somewhere, and they refueled and everything else. Then they got back, and I was still a nervous wreck. And when you landed, I fell out on that ground and said, I'll never leave you again. But that was quite an experience.
Well, yeah, it really was.
And to come home, oh, that was a joy.
How were you received by your family?
Oh, my. Well, I didn't want to by coming home on the notice, because I'd already notified my mother to notify everybody, I wouldn't be coming home because what had happened. So I said, by coming home on a short notice like that, the morning after Christmas, I said, I better not go home because I may give her a heart attack. So what I did, at the old Reagan Airport now, National Airport then, I called, and she picked up the phone, and I said, Mama? She said, oh my God. I said, yes, I'm home. I said, I'm here at National Airport. I'm going to catch a cab. I'll be home. But she hung that telephone up. She called my oldest brother right away. Called the oldest. I was home. He left, and he lived in town. He drove all the way. He drove to National Airport to see if he could catch me. But we had left, gone to Union Station to get a cab, and from there, this other soldier that was with me, we took a cab, and he dropped me off. Then he was going further into Maryland. And when I got home, I saw my mother. You don't know what a joy that was. When I got out of that cab, I saw my mother standing there. It was good to be home. Yeah, it was good to be home. And I even unfortunately, I missed my sister's graduation from Howard University. I missed that. But I was glad that she had graduated. Yeah.
So how did you adjust to civilian life?
The civilian life?
Yes, sir.
That didn't take no time at all doing that. No, indeed. No time at all.
And you had your job waiting for
Oh,
you?
yeah, my job was waiting. All pay and everything, grades and everything was right there. I went down, because it was a government job. I went back, and they was glad to see me back. And when you want to start? Well, I wanted to we would get married and everything else, so I was ready to start back to work right away. So we could start putting our lives together. My wife was beautiful. She waited for me. Waited for me 2 years. And we got married that April, 1953. And which you can figure, this is our 60th year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, 60th year.
Do you remain in contact with any of your fellow veterans?
Oh, yeah. Well, at that particular time, we all were younger. Most of us went into reserve. We stayed in contact, and we saw one another by being born and raised in D.C., small. We went around, run across one another. But as time went on, got older, a few of them began to die, pass on. And the only one to this day that I'm really that close to was that one fella that I met when I've been together ever since. My best friend. We've been together all these number of years. So there are very few of the classmates left. Very few of those that I was inducted in with. Time has taken its toll.
Are you a member of any veterans organization?
No, I'm not. Oh, I belong to the American Legion, but as far as belong to Veterans Association, no, I do not belong to none. One thing about it, I've always worked nights.
Oh.
And I never had time, to make the meetings and all like that. So, but other than my job, my original job, I had to travel. And when they did away with the trains, then I became permanent, but I still worked at nights. But I am a member of the American Legion.
Well, that is a veterans organization.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life?
I don't see, it didn't, not life. The only thing I can say is that being there under the regiment of the military, it made it easy because you were brought up strict. You go into the military stricter. So nothing working life that you haven't experienced almost. You can just about accept anything. Because you know, if you ain't the boss, you got to do what the boss say. So you accept it and work on until one day you become the boss. And it did happen. One day I became the boss. And I was able to move on. And the experience helped me.
So what are your feelings about the military in general?
Great. As I said, I think every young man should have that experience.
I actually agree with you.
I do. The discipline. Yes, it's rough, but it make a man of you.
What message would you like to leave future generations in this interview?
Well, with the right upbringing, well, families are brought up different today. But I would like to see the younger generation have a little bit more respect in what they do. See, they never showed respect. I've gotten more respect now from people when they see me with the cane and everything else. They are very willing to open the door, hold the door. And even we've always been taught, a lady goes first. You don't go in and have the lady coming by. You open the door for a lady. And I would like to see some of that passed on. The dress code, Lord, if my father was to see that. But I just like to see the younger generation show a little bit more respect for their parents and their elders. Because one day, if they live long enough, they'll make it there. But you gotta be generous and whatnot as you go along, as you pass. As that old saying is, be careful how you treat people going up the ladder, because you're gonna have to meet them same people coming back down.
Very true.
Yeah. And when 9/11, I was out, excuse me, I was out back cutting grass. At that time, I could cut grass. And my wife come running out of Albert, something happened, come in. And I came in, she said, an airplane done crashed in New York in one of the buildings. And I ran in there, and then we saw the other one crash. I said, oh my God, what's going wrong? Then they come to find out, it's a terrorist attack. I picked up the telephone, I called my buddy. I said, Sarge, time for us to go back. And let's go back and get these back. That's what I said. It's coming in on our land. Let's go back and go get them. Yeah, that's the way I felt. I was willing to go back and lay my life on the line for somebody coming on my soil. But time has passed me by. But I'm glad things worked out the way they did.
Do you have children?
No, we weren't blessed to have no
Okay.
children. But we have nieces and nephews, and you say they're just the same. Yeah.
And did any of them go in the service?
Oh, let me see. No, none of Zach and Nicole. None. My brother-in-law, I have a brother-in-law was in the service same time I was. But no, none. Kids nowadays don't go by that. Mm-mm.
No, they're not drafted.
That's right. They're not drafted.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to discuss?
I can only say that I felt after I went in, it was an honor to serve my country. My two oldest brothers served, and me being the last, I sure wasn't going to volunteer. But when I called, I served, and I served with honor and respect for my country. And if it came that they'd come back and get me, I was willing to go back. So, and I've lived a good life, a happy marriage, and I'm just now going to enjoy my fading days. That's it.
Thank you for this, and sir, thank you for your service.
Thank you.